And we are live. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, whatever the case may be. Interesting scenario. I'm being interviewed on my channel by my friend Omar Spahi.
Hey, hey.
Uh,
Excited to be here and talking to you and doing an episode of Dreamer Comics Podcast live with you.
There we go. Omar's going to be launching his own channel, his own podcast. When?
October 15th.
October 15th.
Less than 2 weeks away.
Less than 2 weeks. So,
do you want to check it out? You can check it out. It's going to be on YouTube every single day.
Every single day. He's going to be interviewing what kind of people? Who?
Different comic book creators all across the board: writers, artists, editors, letterers.
Give me some names. Give me the money.
I'm trying to think. Who are we doing this week? We have Michael Jan Friedman, Star Trek writer. We have the Man of Action guys and creators of Ben 10, Joe Casey, Stephen T. Siegel, Duncan Rouleau, Ross Ritchie, Bryce Carlson, Philip Sablick from Boom. You name it, we're going to get him on the show and talk comics and talk about their career. So excited.
Excited. Yeah. So he's going to blow up in the YouTube space. By the time this actually airs, I'm sure he'll have a bazillion followers. So
one at a time, right?
No, he's doing this real business-minded. He's getting all of this stuff recorded, edited, professionalized. Not like me, who just shoots from the seat of my pants.
Hey, I love
no,
it.
That's not how the saying goes. That is not correct. Edit that. Edit that. So yeah, we're gonna run into an interview, and then this haphazard interview on my show will be edited and look all professional and stuff for Omar's show. So give the name of your show again.
It's the Dreamer Comics Podcast.
The Dreamer Comics Podcast. Check it out when it's ready. All right, Omar. 3, 2.
Let's do it.
All right, ready?
Yeah.
3, 2.
And we are here with my mind-blowingly awesome friend, Mike S. Miller, artist for Injustice, comic book creator for the Blacklist. And
Blacklist Universe?
The Blacklist Universe. You created your whole universe.
Yes.
Artist for JLA, just to name a few things.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Absolutely, bro.
Excited to have you.
Yeah, it's been a while.
It's been too long.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you, when was your first kind of like experience into getting into art professionally? Like, what was your first kind of foray into diving into it?
First thing I can remember being paid for was, selling artwork in middle school to
Oh wow.
other little suckers. Take my drawings and give me $5. Professionally, quote unquote, I'd say when I was in, there was a magazine cover that I did for a Bay Area computer magazine with my friend Matt Osborne. I can't even remember the name of the magazine, but we did a cover of a guy flying through the air, San Francisco in the background with holding a keyboard in one hand and computer backpack stuff. This was the 90s. Oh, maybe the 80s. This was the 80s.
Wow.
So, and then, I did other odd jobs, sign painting, and I did illustrated an entire, sort of how-to manual. I don't even remember what you were supposed to learn, so I did manual.
What was your first foray into taking that artwork and turning it into comics? When did you kind of jump into comics?
Well, when I was a kid, I drew comics all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And then in 7th grade, after my 6th grade teacher had suggested and placed me into 7th grade AP English, they handed me this really thick book called Great Expectations, and I looked at it and I'm like, I'm not reading that. Apparently, if you don't read the assigned book, you fail AP English.
Wow.
So I failed 7th grade AP.
I didn't know they had AP English in 7th grade.
It was the Bay Area. They have advanced. I don't know why. And so, yeah, it was the class with all the nerds.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was smart enough to be a nerd. Yeah, I just, so my dad made me give up comics.
Wow.
Give up I'm like, so you're going to take away the one thing I do read.
Yeah.
And, yeah, so then, I would still draw some comic-related stuff because my friend Matt and I...
Was it the same Matt Osborne?
Matt Osborne, yeah. We would just, sit in his little his mom was an artist too, and she had a little art studio outside of her house. And so we would just draw all the time and just watch, Monty Python or Highlander or
Whatever
all these
was
other,
there.
whatever movies, because this was back when you had to rent VHS.
Oh yeah.
And so by the time college rolled around, junior college, I went to De Anza in Cupertino. I wanted to be either a biomechanical engineer, like I wanted to get into robotics and bionics essentially, because I'm like, that's going to be the future. Or I wanted to do movie posters. And so I ended up doing mostly art stuff because I kind of like just skipped on the computer class, which I should have taken a computer class. You know where I would be right now. And then it was like 1992, and it was the boom, right?
Yeah.
So, and I had heard Ron Lim is making $30,000 a month, and I'm like, I can draw comic books.
Yeah. Let me in.
Yeah. So I gathered together.
What was Ron drawing at the time, or what was he working on?
He was drawing, I think, Fantastic Four, Infinity, something or other. He was drawing like 3 books.
Okay.
Ron,
Yeah.
madman, right?
That's
great
crazy.
guy, freaking hardest working man in show business.
Yeah.
But it was the boom, so like people were hiring anybody. So I went to WonderCon up in Oakland with a brown paper bag full of my art. I didn't have a portfolio. And it's like, here's my trash bag with my art in it. I went and got in the lines with the editors. I got Tom DeFalco to do my portfolio review, and he was asking if I was tracing stuff, and I'm like, no. So he gave me his card, asked me to keep submitting stuff, a couple other places, and then finally it was suggested to me by Jeff Johnson that I go check out Malibu and go talk to a guy named Chris Ulm, who was the editor-in-chief at the time. So I go over to Malibu and I said, Chris? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, Jeff Johnson told me to show you my work. So he looks at it and he's like stoked. He's like, I love it. He's like, we'll get you some work. And I'm like, fantastic. So I was super excited. Got his card. I mean, that's like the excitement.
Yeah,
when you're a kid.
You're like, oh man, I made it.
Yeah,
Someone's
yeah,
gonna hire me
yeah,
right now.
yeah, for my lifelong dream. And so when I think it was Monday morning, because I was so excited. I was like, I don't want Chris to forget about me. So I took this photocopy of a drawing I did for the Wizard World. Do you remember the Wizard World?
Oh, yeah,
when
the
they used to do the contests where you can draw a character in the wizard robe.
Okay.
I drew Colossus in the wizard robe. I inked it with a technical pen, which is not how you're supposed to ink. And I made a copy of it. I wrote, "Don't forget about me," and attention Chris Holm, and I faxed it to him. 5 minutes later, Chris calls me, and he's like, "Is this how you ink?" And I'm like, "That is a fax, first of all. I inked it with a technical pen, second of all. And third of all, you said you were going to get me penciling work." And he's like, yeah, we'll get you penciling work, but we need an inker right away. So I was like, sure. So they had me inking for the next 2 years. They did give me some penciling work, which was the covers to the Protector's newsstand editions. So I did, I think, maybe 12 that was my first illustrations were covers for Malibu, for Protectors. Not long after that, I kept submitting to Marvel. I got what Marvel used to do. I don't think they do it anymore. Is they'll send an artist. They like a sample script. They'll pay you to do 3 pages to see how fast you can turn them in. And it's like, if you get 3 pages and you turn it in 2 weeks, they're probably not going to hire you.
Yeah.
So I got the 3 pages. I got them done. Sent them back within that week. And they gave me Cable number 12.
Oh wow, that was your first Marvel book?
Yeah.
Nice. And then what year was this? Like around what?
93 or 94. No, it was 93, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this was the first. This was the original Cable series, right? Or so this was the
12th issue. I rounded out the year.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
And where did it go from there? What was your next step after jumping on Cable there?
My next book. Let's see. My next step.
Did you go back to Malibu? Did you stay?
Let me tell you my cocky next step. The next year, at San Diego. Or no, not San Diego. Once again at WonderCon. Remember, this was 92 when I broke in. It was the year they announced Image. So 93, Image was like Guns N' Roses, right? The line for people to sign, it was like, I just remember this part. Rob, Jim, Silvestri. I don't know where everyone else was.
Yeah.
Because I had drawn a piece of Wildcats fighting Cyberforce, and I had a pro badge, so I was all that. And so I took the inked piece, which Matt had inked over me, and I walked past the security, because I had a pro badge, and I walked up to Jim Lee, and I dropped it in his face, in front of like a mile of fans waiting for his signature. And I said, I just thought you might like to see that.
I love it. I love the confidence.
The arrogance. Oh my gosh. And he said, oh yeah, he's all that's it's really good. It's pretty good. So he took one of his posters that he was handing out. He wrote his phone number on it, and he said, hey, why don't you call me up and send me some stuff in. And then I went back and I was like, oh yeah, Jim Lee likes my stuff. So I went back and I had the photocopy of just the pencils, right? So I'm like, he might want to see this. So I walked back up to him and I was like, oh, Jim, I thought you might want to just see the pencils. And he looks at the pencils of this one freaking piece and he goes, where do you live? I go, San Jose. He's like, how would you like to move to San Diego? I'm like, what? He's like, he's like, yeah. So he hired me on the spot. I was the talk of the convention.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was like talking to other, like Moose Bauman and who else was with him?
Oh, what show was this?
WonderCon, 1993.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was.
So this was exactly a year after you went to Malibu for the first time.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
And Jim Lee was like, okay, you're in. Let's go.
Yeah.
And this was at Wildstorm at the first time. So this was your first experience at Wildstorm.
Let me continue the story. I didn't end up at Wildstorm.
Oh.
Even though, well, maybe I shouldn't get into that. I don't want to step on toes. It's the deal was made, offered, accepted, codified, and then reneged. So the details of it aren't important, but I didn't end up at Wildstorm. I ended up moving down later that year. I moved down on my own.
Oh, wow.
After San Diego Comic-Con. Got together with my wife then.
Yeah.
And have been with her ever since. And I started working for Wildstorm, sort of. I mean, I was on contract, so I was never an intern there.
Yeah.
I never had office space there. After but I was always doing work there. I was in there probably 2 or 3 times a week sometimes. So I was kind of part of the studio, but I was still had foot outside the door.
Yeah.
And so one time I did ask Jim, I was like, I'm doing all this work. I'm like, do you want me to be a part of the studio? And he's like, well, you'd have to be in the intern pool. I'm like, dude, I've been a professional comic book artist for 30 years now. You want me to be?
Go back to the intern pool?
3 years. 26 years later. It's yeah. So, yeah.
That's really interesting to see that that growth that you have. Brings me to another question. What was a moment that you thought breaking into comics that you thought you weren't going to make it? What was a really tough moment for you where you didn't know if your future was going to be in comics or in artwork or something like that? Was there a moment where you were like, maybe this is it for me?
Well, in 97, 98, things sort of petered out, and for some reason, I had this system, right? I had all these editors. This is way back when you had to phone people. Mm-hmm. I had all these editors. I had a calendar. I would call an editor and say, do you need anything, blah, blah, blah. And she'd say, no, check back in 2 weeks. the next guy would say, no, check back in 2 days, you know, and I'd like write it down, and I'd be like, constant part of your job as a freelancer is making sure you keep your schedule full. And I hit a freaking wall where there was just nothing, right? Nothing. And out of the blue, my friend Ben Herrera calls me up, and he's been working at this video game company, Ion Storm, in Dallas. And he's like, Mike, I just showed some of your artwork to my art director, and he wants to hire you. And I'm like, well, that seems like what I'm supposed to do, right? My wife did not want to move to Texas. I didn't want to move to Texas, but I was like, you know what? God's closing all these doors, and this one is wide open. I really think this is
the one
we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
And so we ended up moving there. We only stayed there for about 1.5 years in Austin. Mm-hmm. I worked on the first Deus Ex game.
What's Deus Ex?
Deus Ex. It was a RPG, sort of a video game from Ion Storm, okay. Austin. It was actually kind of a groundbreaking game. It was the first game, I think, where you could, because before, remember, you used to be able to walk into a room and you could tell that book was different from everything else, because it's the only thing in the room you can interface with.
Of course.
Well, Deus Ex was like, Warren Spector wanted you to be able to interact with everything in the space.
Oh, wow.
So it was sort of the first game that did that. And so I was the original concept artist on that. But it didn't last long. But you know, there were greater purposes to us living there.
Yeah. So that's always the part of the journey, is you never know what you're going to pick up along the way, and what's going to ultimately kind of lead to your growth. And then after you were doing like the video games, did you decide to come back to comics? Did you kind of keep going off of that editor sheet and go down?
Oddly, I was still doing comics. I was picking up work while I was at Ion Storm.
Oh, really?
So I was moonlighting, doing comics.
Were you filling issues, or what were you?
I was doing, sort of filling issues. I was doing some secret file stuff for Aquaman, regular Aquaman, Green Lantern, and then I got laid off and just started picking up work again, and then moved back to San Diego.
So you were doing Aquaman, Green Lantern, and like what was it like working with those characters? Were you a fan of those characters before?
I was a fan of Green Lantern. I was never a fan of Kyle
Rayner. Well, he was new, right? I mean, this was
I was a Hal Jordan fan.
Yeah, well, I mean, so Kyle didn't come on the scene until what must have been 94, 95, something like that. Yeah. So you only had 5 years to kind of get acquainted with him, and if you're working in comics, it's kind of hard.
His mask. That freaking mask was terrible.
Did you just hate drawing it, or did you?
I hated drawing it because it doesn't make sense on the face, right? It's like you can't have a nose and wear that mask.
Yeah.
So that just always drove me nuts.
Where does the nose go?
Yeah. So anyways.
I love it. And you were working with different writers on Aquaman and Green Lantern.
Aquaman, I worked with Eric Larson. He was the regular writer at that time, and he's the one that tapped me for that book. Green Lantern, I can't remember who wrote.
Was it Ron Mars?
Possibly.
Because I know he had a long run on Kyle Rayner's.
Yeah, and I do feel like I've worked with Ron.
Okay, that might have been 26 years. So that is.
Yeah, it's a long time. And then after that, when I moved back to San Diego, I got tapped to do Adventures of Superman.
Okay.
So I started doing that for a while, which led to me doing JLA.
So what was the difference between Adventures in Superman and Action Comics? Like, which one? How would you classify Adventures in Superman compared to the other books?
Adventures of Superman.
I know it's been a while. I don't even know if you remember or not.
Well, it wasn't my best work. No, there was I was plateauing at that time, and it wasn't until I was on JLA that I felt like I hit this next. Sorry, I'm not answering your question, but I felt like I hit this next level in my artwork, because I discovered that the more often I was drawing a thing, the stiffer my characters got.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So if I did thumbnails and then I did layouts and then I drew the page, I was stiffening at each stage, right? So I'm like, and artists will notice this. Like, you'll draw something in your sketchbook and it'll be like, all this natural organic feel and everything, and then it's like you take your thumbnail and you blow it, and everyone was like.
You're like, no, that's not what the original one looked like.
Yeah,
Let's go back to that.
So what I did instead was I would read the script and I would create my squares, my boxes, and then I just fill them up naturally, panel by panel, and it just loosened up all of my artwork. It reached this whole new level, and that happened during JLA. So. I forgot what your question was.
No, I love it. I love hearing about your process and kind of how you continue to grow. Do you feel like even today you're still growing as an artist? Do you feel like you still?
Yeah, I certainly hope so.
I think that's the goal for anyone who's doing anything.
That was 2000, so if I haven't grown since then.
Wow, that's crazy. That's nuts. And how many issues were you on JLA for?
Golly, I don't even know. I was pinch hitting for Hitch. So he was at first I did like a 2-issue run, and then he was back on it, and then I ended up doing like, gosh, was it maybe a 4-issue run or something like that, and then I was supposed to do a maxi series, but that fell apart.
But in the comic book industry, like JLA is like, did you feel like you were at like the peak at that moment? Like I've made it. Like JLA is Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, like all on the same team.
It's the flagship title of DC.
It is. So I mean, it's like, did you feel like you were like, okay, I finally made it in comic books at that moment?
If I can recall correctly, I felt pretty good about it.
Yeah, I would hope so. I'm sure it is well deserved. So
yeah.
After that, like, what was kind of the next step for you in comic books? Where did you did you go to Marvel? Did you decide to do your own thing? What was
No, I headed up a fledgling company called, at that time it was called Roaring Studios. This guy Les DeBell got my name from Randy Green, and he had the license to George R.R. Martin's The Hedge Knight, which was a prequel series to the Game of Thrones. And so I was like, look, I'll do this book, but I got to be in charge. No one can have any say above me. And he's like, okay. So I basically came in and fired everyone that was involved in the book.
Wow.
Replaced everyone with my own team. Well, I had to get the writer approved with George. And then I had this very close working relationship with George because at the time he wasn't doing
Game of Thrones.
HBO.
Yeah.
So he likes to be involved with stuff, and so he would be involved at every stage with approvals and whatnot, and telling me side stories of like the histories of characters, and I'm like, this is just all in your brain, isn't it?
Like, this character is actually
the entire history of Westeros is in his brain. It's like,
that's crazy. I mean, you can tell that in the way he communicates with these characters. Like this character is the son of this person, and they were married to this person, and this is what happened to them.
I mean, it got to the point I was doing a cover of Game of Thrones at one point, and he's like, "Oh, that character wouldn't have a beard, and that's because Jamie idolized this person. That's why Jamie doesn't have a beard, because it's like, dude, you've never even mentioned that in the books. You know?
It's all in his head.
He's
like, no, you got to redo that. That's a really important detail, but no one has even known that, but he knows that. And so he's so close and personalized with these characters. And then, so after you were doing the Game of Thrones prequel, like, did you continue onto like doing like, okay, we're gonna do Game of Thrones? Like, were you reading?
The plan was to do Game of Thrones.
Okay.
Long term, but Les was a nobody. He'd practically never done anything. He had just sort of harassed George, like constantly sending him new artwork. This is what we're doing. This is what we're doing. Until George is like, okay,
we get it.
I'm not giving you Game of Thrones because that is like a 10-year commitment,
Yeah.
But I'll give you this, and if you do well with this, then we'll see where it goes. And so, starting with George, we then did Robert Jordan's New Spring. I drew that. We did Richard Knack's Dragonlance. I did the breakdowns on that. Robert Silverberg's Seventh Shrine. We did that as sort of a cross between a novella and an illustrated book. So Les's talent is somehow finding New York Times best-selling authors and getting them to give him the rights to their books.
Wow.
It is this bizarre. I'm like, dude, that is all you should do.
Yeah,
just do that.
Focus on that.
Focus on that.
You
and
found your
yeah,
niche.
yeah, and so yeah, that's what we're doing. And then
When did Game of Thrones get picked up by HBO? Like, when was that process during this whole ordeal? Because I know you were working with them before.
it was after I did the second Dunk and Egg book. The Hedge Knights is the Dunk and Egg series.
Okay.
It's so Hedge Knight, and then the Sworn Sword was the second one. Les had actually partnered with Marvel to do that book. It was 2007. And so Marvel got the rights to Hedge Knight, Sworn Sword, and had they just continued a good relationship with George, they would have gotten the rights to Game of Thrones. Marvel dropped the ball.
Wow.
Marvel dropped the ball. Let the contracts expire.
Yeah.
Right? And then HBO announces Game of Thrones. And then Marvel comes back. And George goes.
Yeah, I can imagine he's like, I'm sorry we're doing this, and then the first season kind of came out and took the world by storm.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's crazy.
So then Amazon actually launched their own comic book publishing imprint, Jet City Comics, using the Hedge Knight and the Sword as their premier launch titles.
Oh wow.
So yeah, my royalty checks on those got pretty good for a while.
I mean, that's huge. If Amazon's behind you and they're putting your energy into selling your books, then you're gonna get some definite attention that way.
Yeah, wasn't bad.
I love it. And then after you kind of wrapped up, I know you still do covers for Game of Thrones.
Yes.
And so you're still doing that, but then you got called in to do Injustice.
Yeah.
So
well, I had been doing. I've been working for what we call DC West Coast, which is the old Wildstorm guys.
Yeah.
For a while on a lot of books like DC Universe Online Legends, Batman, Arkham Unhinged, stuff like that. And then I did the last 2 issues of Wildcats and 2 of the last issues of The Authority with Tom Miller. And Tom loved my work on The Authority. He loved that I was so expressive with my faces, and that's what he really wants from an artist. And so he tapped me, through the editor and whatnot, to do Injustice. And everybody just thought, oh, another video game title, and then
that thing blew up.
#1 digital comic in the entire world for like 5 years running.
Wow. And I mean, I think it goes to credit with Tom, it goes to credit with you, just the whole team kind of put together, Jim as well, the editor on it, he put together a great team, and they did
Bruno Redondo,
yeah.
And, gosh, who else was drawing that? Tom Duranic, who was the guy I was inking on Protectors.
Oh, wow.
My first book.
It kind of comes full circle.
Yeah, it was 20 something years, and it was between us both having our name on the same book.
I love it. That's so funny that it kind of works out in that roundabout sort of way.
Yeah, cyclical.
And so whenever you how did they kind of get you on Injustice? Did they kind of pitch you that this is like Superman but he's evil now, or like what?
That was the funniest thing, because the pitch for Injustice, I was like, I just did this book. I just did DC Universe Online Legends where Clark kills Lois. Lex Luthor is a good guy. All this stuff. I'm like, I literally just did this book. Regular people can get superpowers. Yep. And they're like, yeah, but this one's going to be kind of different.
And they were right.
Yeah, and they were right. So, but you know what? It was another, for lack of a better word, it's an out of continuity JLA title.
Yeah.
And so, cool with me.
Yeah. Did you play the video game beforehand? Have you played it?
I hate fighting games.
Not the kids. The kids didn't rope you into playing it a few times before you even.
No, we're mostly a first-person shooter, or they play a lot of like Terraria and
even know what a Terraria is.
And sandbox games.
Okay.
You know, sandbox
Yeah,
games.
yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. I love it. So now, at what point, I want to know your first point doing creator-owned comic books. I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about you, because I know, you know, artist is a big part of what you do, but it's not all you do. You also have a great mind to you, and you also have a great ability to create characters and create worlds. What was something that, like, what was your first kind of thing where I'm like, okay, I'm going to do that? And I'm not talking about, like, 7th grade Mike. I'm talking about, like,
Yeah.
like, you know, adult Mike, professional comic book
Well,
creator Mike.
professionally, I mean, I've always sort of come up with ideas. My wife will tell you how sick she is of, hey, I got another one.
I gotta tell you, one of my personal favorites comics of yours,
Uh-huh.
I think you know this. You know what I'm gonna say.
No.
Bless This Mess.
Oh.
It's an amazing little webcomic you do about you and the family.
Yeah, I haven't done that for a year, man.
Yeah, but it's still,
Yeah.
it was one of those comic books that you read and you instantly are like, okay, like, I'm part of this family. You feel the closeness that the family has, and it's something that's really beautiful.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that was fun. I wish I had time for that. You know, it was syndicated in Scandinavia,
Oh, really? That's awesome.
but it was like the royalty checks weren't enough for me to be like, oh, good, I should really spend, you know, 2 or 3 hours a day on this project.
Of course. Like Scandinavia. A little bit more.
Yeah,
Maybe.
yeah, we needed. I did need a little more. It's a big investment. You know?
Yeah, it's a big time commitment
Yeah.
to make artwork like
Yeah. Although my kids love it, so maybe I'll squirt a few more out.
that.
So they give me plenty of material to work with.
I'm sure they do.
But creator-owned stuff, I guess it was while I was working with the DeBells, you know, Roaring Studios, that part of the thing we wanted to do was our creator-owned titles. And so it's when I know, it's like when my mind knows there's an outlet, it just starts working overtime. Like any little thing will give me an idea and it'll launch into, like I had misheard something, right? I think I misheard 6-string samurai as 6-gun samurai, and I'm like, 6-gun samurai. That is a perfect title for a book. So I wrote an entire, you know, story, and then I hired another guy, Sean Jordan, to help just flesh it out because I was just busy. I didn't want to write everything myself. And then, like, I just remember I was sitting in my living room one day, and I just got this spark of inspiration, and it was, what if there was like this FBI manhunter who is wounded by the criminal that he's chasing, who's a mass murderer, you know, murderer, mass murderer, serial killer, and the serial killer, you know, gets away, but then like knocks on his door like years later, saying he needs his help to save an innocent person.
Oh wow!
Right,
So
and I'm like.
twisted.
And it's, this little idea pops into my head, and I call an artist friend I know, and I pitch him just that line. He's like, that's awesome, let's do it. And so I sat down and I just wrote Deal with the Devil out. And that book right there, just from the pitch and the simple concept, and the comic book itself, the first con I took that to, a writer, David Tishman, comes up and he's like looking at, he's always looking for properties because he writes for Hollywood. He had a first look deal with MTV at the time. And he grabs the Deal with the Devil, and I told him what it was. He goes, oh, okay, cool. And he goes home. I swear to you, next morning, I saw him running to my booth.
I love it.
As soon as the doors open, because he didn't want anyone else to get the rights to this
story. He was like, I need it now. We're gonna go take this to MTV. We're gonna take it to wherever.
Yeah. So it was an MTV, and then it was at Lionsgate. I actually got it optioned at Lionsgate. Bought a Carmen Dia with that money. Still sitting in my driveway rotting. I should fix it up. I will someday. Anyways, and then after Lionsgate, there was this really weird thing because Lionsgate used to have this reputation for doing everything they option. You know, options don't happen anymore.
No, yeah. Everything gets optioned, and now an announcement for something getting optioned is like, okay, we'll see if this ever actually happens.
Yeah, but it's like they don't want to spend the money anymore. You know, they'll option something to get it off the table.
Mm-hmm.
But Lionsgate had this reputation. I think about 95% of the things they actually paid money to option, they would make into films.
Wow.
And so even my manager was like, you know, she was asking this to, I can't remember, it's like the head of Lionsgate. and she was asking about that. She's like, you guys have a reputation for doing this. And she's like, Lisa, this movie's getting made. And so we were all like, woo! And but then there was this, I can't remember his name. It was Carl Iger? That might be it. But there was a guy who was trying to do a hostile takeover of Lionsgate, which happened to be during mine. And so, out of self-preservation, Lionsgate jettisoned everything that wasn't already in production.
Oh, wow.
Like the first time. And mine was in there with that. And, but then multiple production companies knew that it was free and wanted it. So Kevin Spacey's production company wanted it, and then the one we ended up going with was Broken Road, and Broken Road has had it forever, like ever since. This whole thing has been about a 10-year process.
Oh wow.
Development hell, right? It's got a screenplay, it's got a director. They're shopping it out to talent right now. Who knows if it'll ever happen?
But that's the process.
That's Hollywood. So
you have to just enjoy the process.
It's funny because the guy Sean from Broken Road.
Yeah.
Well, when I talked to him or he emails me, he's like, man, Mike, you're so patient. I want to thank you for being so patient. I'm like, I don't say it, but I'm like, well, that's because I never expect this to happen.
Yeah. You're like, if it happens, great, but if it doesn't, then it's okay too.
It's this weird Hollywood thing I learned from Don Johnson in the 80s, because people were like, oh, how do you deal with disappointment in Hollywood? And he's like, I never expect anything to happen. He's like, that's the only attitude you can have in Hollywood.
Absolutely. It's like, because it's a very weird thing. It's like, hurry up and wait. It's like, we need this from you yesterday. And then you're like, here it is. And they're like, oh, cool, we'll let you know in 6 months if anything happens. And then 6 months later, you're like, what happened? They're like, oh, you're still around? We forgot you were existed. So I think that's the process with optioning and creating, like, at least, because things take time. There's so many moving parts. It's like, it feels like you're putting together a constantly moving puzzle. It's like, okay, cool. We have this director attached. No one move. No, okay. Are we okay? Okay, we have the screenwriter attached. Okay, no one. Oh, the director dropped out. Yeah. Okay, it's the process. You have to kind of just.
I will say one saving grace. I did not go with Kevin Spacey's company.
That is probably the right call right now. At what point did you go? Okay. Did you go, okay, well, should I publish this myself? Should I publish it with another comic book company? Like, did you think about taking it to other publishers?
Well, at the time, I was still on good terms with Eric at Image. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, Brett Berner came on, and he was like, if I can get, because he wanted to, like, get into publishing comics because he liked the business model of guaranteed sales.
Yeah. He
came from the magazine world, where they come back and you eat it, right? So Brett partnered with funders, and we created Alias. They would fund the books. I would produce the books, and then Brett would manage the production, publishing, and all that stuff. And at first we went through Image, right? So we took, and then we started picking up other books like not Lullaby. I picked up Lullaby from Hector Sevilla. He didn't have a story. He just had artwork that he was like kind of making as he went along. And I'm like, well, why don't I actually write this into an actual story? And then I brought Ben Avery, the writer of The Hedge Knight, or the co-writer of Hedge Knight, or adapter. And so we worked on that together, and so Lullaby was one of the books, and then Imaginaries was another one of those. I can still remember when I came up with the idea for that. I was in the parking lot. I think my dad was in the hospital in Portland, and I came up with the idea of what happens to your imaginary friends when you grow up and stop believing in them.
Oh wow! It's interesting because that was a Boom Studios book, right?
No.
Oh, because they did something very similar with that kind of premise behind it. So,
really?
Yeah. You should.
Ross.
They did something very similar, and it has that kind of thing where it was it was this like imaginary friend kind of goes missing, and then like they have to kind of hunt him down.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
No, what happens in mine is I have a character called Superhero G, and he ends up, his creator, Tanner, his parents are going through a divorce. And so when he realizes this, he decides it's time to give up on childish things. And one of the things he does is take a drawing of his creation, crumples it up, and throws it in the trash. And then, like a meteor landing on the ground, Superhero G lands in the imagination, which is where they go. And realizes that it's become this fascistic realm,
yeah.
because there's a character there who was also the creation of a child, but as a supervillain, who was created to take over the world. And so when she got to the imagination, that's what she did, right? And then Superhero G shows up, and he's a superhero, has to deal with this. But at the same time, he's trying to get back to the real world because his creator is in pain and needs him. And actually, that story was like, that was my most rewarding project, because there was this kid at San Diego, like the year after it was published, and he comes up to me, and I'm just sitting there signing books and whatnot, and he's like, "Are you Mike Miller?" And I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "Did you write The Imaginaries?" I'm like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Well, I wrote it. Ben Avery co-wrote it with me, but yeah, I came up with it." And he's like, "I'll be back." He came back the next day, couldn't talk, and handed me a card, like a Hallmark card that he had bought.
Oh.
And I open it up, and it is like tiny little, it's written out this whole card of how much that story had meant to him, as a kid of divorce and all that kind of stuff. And I'm a kid of divorce too, and I mean, so
Me
many
too,
people are.
so,
Yeah. So he just, that moment has been my most rewarding moment as a creator
That's
in
beautiful.
my entire career. Yeah.
That's really like, it's something special. Is like, you don't realize that like when you make really read them, and it affects their life in a positive way, and they take values from this, and they can get over stuff, because you never know what someone's going through, and so it's really amazing that you're able to help people through a difficult time. I think that's one of the beauties in comic books, is you're able to help people and actually connect with fans in that way.
That's why I want to keep doing it.
I love it. Even after 26 years, you want to keep going.
Yeah, but now it's like my creative juices are just like full tilt. I want to bring the entire Blacklist universe. So Blacklist universe is my name for my universe of characters. It's a heroic universe, so you can call them superheroes. That's fine. But what I've kind of done is I've taken all the things I've created over the last 25, even longer, 30 years, and I've picked out all the things that I thought would fit into this kind of universe. Even Superhero G, whereas Superhero G is, takes place in some fictional world and whatnot. At the end of the spoilers, at the end of the story, he comes into the real world through a device that the Ice Queen has made, or actually she had her minions make, because she, after she had taken over this world, she knew about the real world, and she wanted to take over the real world. So they brought the battle to the real world. Superhero G then comes into the real world, and I'm like, I'm gonna have Superhero G and Hero Boy stay in the real world as a part of the Blacklist universe, because it'd be like a cross between the Tick and Shazam. Just this, except there's this kid, because the kid grants Superhero G powers through his belief in him, right? So
he needs him.
Yeah, so he needs the kid. Kid needs him.
That's a really cool way to do it. And so with Blacklist Universe, like, what's the overarching plan? Like, how many titles do you want to have? How many titles do you currently have? What's the plan? In
production, I have Lone Star, which is on Indiegogo as we're recording this. We'll probably be into Lone Star 2 or 3 by the time this airs, I'm not sure. Just look up Lone Star on Indiegogo. Then I have The Nuclear Family in production. That is about, it's sort of a Honey, I Shrunk the Kids meets The Incredibles, where this father is like this kind of crazy inventor type character, and he creates a projector and imaging device that can create three-dimensional photographs. But what he doesn't realize is that he's using multi-dimensional like algorithms in order to do this. It's like it's kind of a mistake in his math, right? And so he goes to take a picture, a family portrait with this machine, and it transports them into another dimension. This dimension alters their DNA, and they return with powers. Like, so the father is sort of like multiple man, but each multiple has a particular facet of his personality that is dominant.
Got it.
So you can have anger, you can have logic, you can have fear, you can have these different, because like my kids always ask me what power I would want if I was a superhero, and I'm always so like practical about it. I'm like, geez, I really do wish there were like three of me.
Right. You and me both. I think that'd be, so you'd get a lot more done, I'll tell you that.
Exactly. So that's why the father has that, and the mother has sort of like telepathic abilities. The daughter is the powerhouse. She's a 10-year-old kid, but she can manipulate mass. So
that's fun.
Yeah. And then the son can manipulate like light and the electromagnetic spectrum and stuff like that. So together they are the nuclear family.
I love it.
And so also I have God's Sword. It's in the works. The writing is being done now. Ben Avery is going to co-write it with me. Paolo Pantalina is supposed to be drawing it, but I need to talk to him at this show. He hasn't turned in anything. But Paolo, I wrote God's Sword way back when we were doing Alias, and he was supposed to do the God's Sword originally, and that was before he was ever published by anybody. Now he's like on Batman and the Outsiders or whatever book at DC. It's been 10, 12 years, something like that. And so, like, I asked him at San Diego, and I'm like, hey, would you want to work on God's Sword? He goes, yeah, man. So hopefully that will get into the works at some point. God's Sword is about a girl named Eden, who's the daughter of a Jewish archaeologist and, like, an Ethiopian princess. And in one of their digs, they discover the golden sword, the hilt of the golden sword, the golden hilt of the flaming sword that guarded the Garden of Eden.
So this was Michael's sword?
No. That's this weird thing. That's why it popped out to me and gave me the idea, is because when you're reading through Genesis, it says at the entry to the Garden of Eden, God placed two cherubim and a flaming sword that turned this way and that. Not two cherubim with flaming swords.
Yeah, it's also a flaming sword.
Two cherubim and a flaming sword. I'm like, dude, there's a flaming sword out there that turns this way and that to
I love it.
Yeah, so people really want me to get on that one, but I have to wait for the right
team and to get it.
I have the right team. I just need them to do their work. I have other projects in longer term planning stages, but I'm taking this one step at a time.
Yeah.
I have a 10, 20-year plan with this whole thing.
I've been there. I've been doing comic books and getting my own self-publishing stuff, and one at a time is the only way to do it, and make sure you do them to the best quality and you're able to get it out, and it's definitely not a sprint. It's a marathon. Yeah.
And that's the amazing thing about the Indiegogo, at least when it works, is that you can take the time to do your best work. This cookie cutter mentality, I was just talking to Ed McGinnis about this on the way here. The cookie cutter mentality, the you're on a contract, you get this many books done, schedule. I mean, I understand it as a business, and as a business it works, but creatively, there's a reason almost every comic book that you read in today is better off in the trash can, because you're never going to read it again.
It's interesting though, because there's there's also a law that says that if you have a month to get a project done, it'll take you those last 3 days of like that push to make sure that it gets done because there's a deadline and there's also something there. So it's interesting that even with a longer timeline, some people would still go, "Oh no, I'll get to that," and then they would do it in the last 3
I'm
days.
not interested in that. But
I'm just telling you that that's just how some people are, you know.
No,
so,
dude, I've been in this meat grinder for a quarter of a century.
Yeah.
I've seen it. I've got. How many books have I done, and how few of them would I want to read twice? Because I was part of that meat grinder. I was part of that. Hey, we need these 11 pages done in 3 days. Can you do it?
Yeah.
You know, it's like, how are you supposed to get inspired, quality work?
Where it's like just go.
Yeah, it's not. It's. You know, I'm an editor. I've got 12 books to do. Let's just find 12 competent people to write, and competent is not inspired.
Yeah.
You want both.
Yeah.
You know.
People who are just super dedicated and super have great ideas, brilliant ideas.
You want what you want. What you want if you have a company and you're trying to create great comic books is a stable of highly skilled, absolute fanboys.
Yeah.
Fangirls.
Yeah.
Either way.
Yeah.
They have to be so nerded out by this stuff. They have to have been dreaming of 12 different
ways that
great ideas since they were kids. You know, 20 things Spider-Man has never done that I want to accomplish. If you're just like, hey, Joe, you need work?
Yeah.
Here's freaking Spider-Man.
Yeah, he's gonna punch the Green Goblin, and then he's gonna punch the Hobgoblin, and then we're gonna get a check, and that's that. But that's I agree with you. It's about doing quality work and getting people who are hungry and have that passion within themselves, because that's the stuff that people really speaks volumes, and kind of like they'll live on. The trades live on, and
take it back to the 80s. Take it back to Jim Shooter. The way Jim Shooter hired, he hired great people with great ideas and just let them do great work.
Yeah.
He didn't have, he wasn't hand up the back puppet master trying to, control every little thing and trying to steer everything into event after event after event. I mean, he did do events. He originated the events.
Yeah, he did. He was in charge of
Secret Wars.
Didn't he do Infinity War as well?
War. Yeah.
And so he was definitely a still big event. You know what's interesting though is whenever you're creating universe building, the way you learn about different characters and stuff is through events. Because if your character, say, for whatever reason you're a fan of, Green Lantern, you go, okay, Green Lantern's the one book I'm reading it every month, and then all of a sudden you go, oh, Green Lantern's now in this event book where he's in here with now, Starfire and Wonder Woman and all these other characters that you're like, oh, cool, Booster Gold. You learn about all these other characters, and that's how you kind of go from reading just Green Lantern to reading all these other new books.
Yeah, but that can be so limiting, because when you have a wide ensemble like that, who gets the play? Who gets the play? It's Wolverine and Spider-Man are going to get the play.
Yeah.
Captain America maybe. So what you need to do is remember, you're not old enough. So when I was a kid, I was never interested in Daredevil, right? Loved Wolverine. And then one issue of Daredevil had Wolverine holding Daredevil up by one arm on the cover, and I'm like, I'm buying that.
Yeah.
And then I totally got into Daredevil. So you introduce, and I'm planning on doing this with Blacklist as well, where we're introducing, the other books that are coming
through the characters that you have already.
Yeah, and it is a shared universe, obviously, so you get this interplay. But yeah, and there will be an event. It's called Harmony, and it's based on an idea that I came up with in 1990.
Oh, wow.
It's an old idea.
That's awesome. These things have been circulating for a long time. Like, you think about, Spawn was Todd McFarlane's idea since he was a 16-year-old kid, and he kind of just ran with it, and now it's now it's coming on its second movie, and it's been around since 1992, 1991.
Yeah.
So it's crazy to kind of see the evolution of how things kind of come, even as a kid or since the 1990s to now. It's kind of cool. So I mean, it's cool. So what I wanted to go all the way back now for a second. I wanted to go back to Kid Mike and ask, did you ever do any formal training with your artwork? Was there ever I need to go to a specific art school, or I
wanted to go to art center, but they rejected me because I had too much comic book work in my portfolio.
Really?
Now art center has comic book degrees.
Yeah.
So I can go teach there now. But yeah, that was the school I wanted to go to. You know, best school on the West Coast. Of course, now they're kind of.
But what was like what did you do instead of that to kind of get better at your craft? Did you just draw, or was there a specific tutorial process you did to hone your craft?
When I was a kid, I mean, probably, you know, 4th grade or so, I would take my mom's drawing book. She was an artist, and I would take her, but, you know, she's a woman artist. She's not drawing He-Man. You know, so she had books on flowers and horses and birds and perspective, which was the one that really helped me the most. I was in 4th grade learning perspective because those were the art books my mom had.
You're ahead of the curve.
Right. So by the time I was in drafting in 6th grade and junior engineering in 7th grade, like I was like, I don't need to learn all this.
Yeah, I already know this. I
learned that
years
ago.
1st grade, I had it. It was done.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
So, but yeah, just learning from those books, learning from how to draw comics the Marvel way, just copying a lot of stuff, and then I guess in the mid '90s. No. Yeah, early mid '90s. I met a guy named Neil Lamb. I was looking around downtown for a new studio space, and I walked up to this place and I saw this guy inking a drawing, and I'm like, oh man, this guy's great. And it turned out he was a teacher at the Watts Atelier, which is a like drawing painting school in San Diego. And Nia just looked, I'm like, you know, hey, check out my art. And he looked at it and he's like, you want me to critique this? I'm like, yeah. And he just ripped me to freaking shreds.
Wow.
And I'm like, wow, do I really have that much to learn? So he pointed me to Bridgman, George Bridgman. And he's like, read this book. I'm like, read it.
Do you remember the name of the book? Or
George Bridgman's Complete Guide to Drawing from Life. Okay. I tell every single artist to get that book. Yeah.
Go through it like it's...
like your Bible.
Yeah.
Your artistic Bible. Yeah. After 6 months going through Bridgman, I'd show Nia some of my newer stuff, and he still has stuff, you know, I have to work on. But it got to the point where I would show him stuff, and he'd be like, well, there's still something wrong with the way you do Knuckles. And I'm like, all right, we're good.
Yeah. Like, you're just going to always find a reason to complain. I'm going to be like, okay, I learned. So as long as you're showing that growth and stuff.
Yeah.
Now, whenever, you know, you're doing all these books now for the Blacklist, what do you do to kind of get the word out about the books that you have? Like, whenever you're marketing yourself to letting the fans know, do you do like articles with press? Do you kind of like, do you send out tweets? What's the most effective way for you to communicate with the fans when you have your projects coming out?
YouTube primarily. Facebook sucks. Instagram is kind of hit or miss. I haven't done a lot of press, but yeah, mostly it's the YouTube audience. Okay. So I've got a little over 3,100 subs now, although I haven't checked today.
I love it.
And yeah, I mean, and that's gone from, 2 months ago, 2 or 3 months ago, I had 129.
Wow.
So I've kind of
just caught fire and kept going, and
just keep going, do new content every single day, and
that's the way to do it. Consistency is really key.
Yeah, and then have some good shows, like, you know, kind of stumbled my way into doing this Drawn and Quarterly thing I do every week. Have you seen that?
I think I've seen a thumbnail of it. It's like you and a bunch of artists.
Yeah, not Drawn and Quarterly, Drawn and Quartered. Drawn and Quarterly was a magazine. Drawn and Quartered. So it's me and 7 other artists and Edwin Boyette, who's our moderator, and we select a character, and then we all have 2 hours to draw it. And these are professionals: Art T. Bear, John Mallon, Malin, Gary Shipman, Eric Nieltowski. You know, and I was talking to Marat Michaels about coming on today. And he's like, yeah, that sounds cool.
I love it.
I want to get Rob Liefeld on there.
Yeah, right.
We'll go talk to him tomorrow. So, yeah, and it's only like its 4th weekend, and it's become the biggest show on my channel.
That's awesome.
So
it's
yeah.
great when you're getting other people on your channel who are experienced with these other creators to learn about you, and you also get your fans over to them, and you kind of help build that comic book community, because I think that community is so important as well.
Yeah, and then that's another thing is I'm trying to bring in my fans. I pay to advertise on these other sites because, dude, there's like, I don't know, hundreds of thousands or millions of Injustice comic fans who don't buy the book.
Really?
They just go to Comicstorian or Comics Island or one of these places and watch them read it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, those people
are fans of me.
Are my fans.
Yeah.
I need to somehow gather them together and bring them to me. So I advertise on their sites.
Yeah.
You know, I have a
That's
little
very
commercial.
Smart.
Yeah. But I also want to reach out to my Game of Thrones fans.
Yeah.
Because I've been so much in this space since 2003.
That's crazy. That's still like mind-blowing. That's
yeah.
15 years.
And so I've been doing mostly daily Game of Thrones, a little Game of Thrones snippet show called Got Mike, Game of Thrones, Mike, question mark. And then once a week I do a Game of Thrones roundtable with a couple of the other Game of Thrones YouTubers, Quinn, whose Ideas of Ice and Fire, and That Gray Area, which she hasn't been on yet because she fell asleep last night, but we've only done 2 episodes, so hopefully that will build, because these are people with like 90,000 subs.
Yeah, and then
so
they're all
can
bring them in and
bring them in, and then it brings them into this space in total.
Absolutely.
Not just me, but all the other people in the Comicsgate area.
Yeah.
It's like it builds out the space. What we're trying to do is bring new blood in.
Absolutely.
Because that is something Marvel and DC have failed to do for the last 30 years.
Yeah, it seems like the market keeps getting smaller and smaller, and that's one of my goals too, is just to continue to build out new blood and make sure that new people are learning about comic books instead of going the other way, and people are like, oh no, I don't do comics, I just watch the movies or learn about the characters or this or that. It's like, no, read the comic books. This is where the best stories are told. You have to come back and do it. So I know. Well, that's what we're working on. We're doing it one day at a time.
They just had the last 10, 15 years of the most unprecedented media attention on their core characters ever. And they not only did nothing to draw the movie theater crowds into comic book stores, they did nothing to feed that crowd 12-page sample books or anything of the sort. And not only did they not do any of that, they changed all of the main characters. From the characters you see on the screen into girls, Asians, whatever. I don't want to get into the whole forced diversity issue, but I'm friends with like the #1 retailer in San Diego, right? He's got like 9 stores. And he's like, he's got stories of mothers bringing their kids into the store saying, I just watched Thor. I want to get a Thor comic. And you go over to the shelf, and it's Jane Foster.
Yeah.
And they're like, and they just walk out of the store empty-handed. They're like, oh, you can buy these old ones. And they're like,
no, we don't want the old ones. I understand that.
Yeah, it's like, if you were, say you're IDW or, what's another one? Dynamite, right? And you're like, hey, Marvel, or hey, Disney, can I license Thor, to make comics? Marvel would probably make more money licensing Thor to Dynamite, because Dynamite would be like, we're going to take Chris freaking Hemsworth, we're going to put him on the page, and we're going to sell it to kids.
Yeah.
And Marvel just drops the ball, like, for the past decade. And it's like this argument that just drives me bananas, because they've not only not reached out to kids, they practically made it impossible for kids to want to jump in.
Yeah, I totally understand that. One last question for you. What advice do you have for any aspiring artists? Like, what advice would you give to someone who's trying to break into the comic book industry?
There's better ways to make money. It's not easy.
Yeah.
It is not easy.
It's definitely not easy.
It is.
But if somebody's passion is art and they want to, this is something that their passion, what would you tell them still, like, listen, find...
No, you know what? If you want to do it, if it's the only thing that's going to make you happy, then do it, but first learn your craft. Learn the living hell out of your craft. If you... It's one thing to be self-assured. Obviously, if it wasn't for my self-assured arrogance,
You walking
I wouldn't have got where I was. But at the same time, I probably didn't deserve to get where I was. But you know what? It's that type of personality who's just going to bulldoze his way through in order to get where he needs to go. But I wish I had the skill set to back up my attitude back then. Now, I've gotten to the point, and this happened a long time ago, where I was so cocksure that my art was great. And then, like, after I learned all this stuff, I look back at that art, I'm like, holy cow, that art freaking sucks. And so now I am always of the mindset that even if I think something looks good, I'm probably going to look back at this in a little while.
Yeah, and go, wait a
I
second.
think this really sucks.
Let's-
So I'm never sure anymore. I know I'm at a professional competency.
But there's always getting better. There's always growing.
Yeah.
And that's something to do.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on the show today and talking comics with me.
Yeah, brother. Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
And hey, it's a little over an hour. Anybody got any questions for Omar? Takes like 14 seconds.
You're
Yeah.
good.
Do not tell them any politics. Beta Ray Bill is better than Femme Thor. My God, is not a woman. What the heck? They make. Oh, they're just talking about all that. This was a fantastic interview. I came in late. Who is Omar? Omar, introduce yourself. Pitch your channel again.
My name's Omar Spahi. I host a comic book podcast called Dreamers Comics Podcast. And what we do is we interview a different comic book creator every single day. And now there's different episodes on iTunes. We're the #1 podcast on iTunes. So we do different creator every single week, and we talk to them about how they break into comics and how their comic books are made, what their process is, and what characters they've worked on, and their growth.
And then they'll be like edited and made to look all professional and stuff.
Fancy, shiny.
So anyways, thanks guys for tuning in. We will check you later. No Aloha Hour tonight from me. You're going to have to check in with Edwin for that one. Say goodbye, Omar.
Goodbye, Omar.